My name is Daniel, and I'm 44 years old, a husband and father who believed he had built a strong, loving family. For most of my adult life, I thought I understood what happiness looked like. I had a steady job, a modest home, and two people who meant the world to me: my wife, Claire, and our daughter, Ava. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. Every evening, the smell of Claire's cooking filled the kitchen, and Ava's laughter echoed through the living room. Those small, ordinary moments were the rhythm of our lives, the kind of peace that makes you believe it will last forever. Claire was my balance. She had this calm presence, a soft-spoken wisdom that kept our family grounded. She always knew how to make sense of life's chaos. I used to tease her that she could turn even bad news into something beautiful, just by how she spoke. And Ava, our only child, she was our pride and joy. She had Claire's kindness and my stubbornness, a combination that made her both charming and unpredictable. At 21, Ava was in her final year of college, studying business management. She was ambitious, intelligent, and independent, sometimes a little too independent. The older she got, the more she drifted from us. It wasn't rebellion, exactly. It was more like she was in a hurry to prove she didn't need her parents anymore. I tried not to take it personally. I told myself it was part of growing up, the same way I once distanced myself from my own parents. Still, there were nights when I missed her company at dinner, missed hearing about her day or her dreams. Claire, on the other hand, never complained. She always said, "She's finding herself, Daniel. Let her." And I trusted her judgment because Claire always understood people better than I did. But as months went by, I began to notice something different about her. She started getting tired more easily. At first, she brushed it off, said it was stress or lack of sleep. She was the kind of woman who put everyone else first, even when her body was begging her to slow down. Then came the coughs, dry, persistent, followed by waves of fatigue that left her barely able to get out of bed some mornings. I remember one night, she fainted in the kitchen while washing dishes. I caught her just before she hit the ground. Her face was pale, her pulse weak. That's when the fear set in, the kind that starts small but grows until it consumes every thought you have. We went to the doctor the next day, expecting something minor, maybe an infection, maybe anemia. I held her hand in the waiting room, trying to ignore the way her fingers trembled. She gave me a weak smile and whispered, "Don't look so worried, I'm fine." But the look in her eyes said she didn't believe that either. The tests dragged on for weeks. Blood work, scans, endless appointments that all led to more questions than answers. During that time, Ava barely came home. She said she was busy with exams, projects, her internship. I wanted to be understanding, but every time Claire asked when Ava might visit, I saw the disappointment flicker behind her smile. Finally, the hospital called. They wanted us both to come in for the results. I'll never forget that day, the smell of antiseptic, the soft hum of machines, the way the doctor's expression shifted when we sat down. There's a certain silence before bad news, a kind of pause where you know everything you're about to hear will change your life. I tried to stay calm. I held Claire's hand tightly, but I could feel my own pulse racing. The doctor cleared his throat and began explaining the results. His words came out clinical, detached, almost rehearsed. He said, "Malignant, advanced, and terminal." But the only thing I truly heard was cancer. Time froze. My brain refused to process what those words meant. I looked at Claire, waiting for her reaction, but she didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. She just stared at the floor, her eyes glistening, her lips pressed together as if she was holding the universe inside her chest. I wanted to scream, to demand a different diagnosis, but I couldn't find my voice. That evening, when we got home, the world felt strangely quiet. Even the house seemed to sense the change. I cooked dinner, but neither of us ate. We sat in silence, occasionally glancing at each other, as if afraid that speaking would make it all too real. Later that night, as I helped her into bed, she took my hand and said, "Promise me one thing, Daniel. Whatever happens, you'll stay strong for Ava." I nodded, unable to speak. When I told Ava the next morning, her reaction was distant. She said all the right words, Oh my God, that's terrible. I'm so sorry, Dad, but her tone lacked the weight I expected. She didn't cry. She didn't ask how long her mother had left. She simply said, "Keep me updated," and ended the call. I wanted to believe it was shock, that she needed time to process. But deep down, something felt off. I watched Claire lie in bed later that night, her fragile frame barely visible under the sheets, and I made myself a silent promise. No matter what happened, I would be by her side every single day. What I didn't know was that Ava's choices in the weeks to come would destroy the very foundation of everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and family. The day we officially learned that Claire's cancer was terminal felt like the world had stopped turning. I remember every detail of that sterile doctor's office, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights, the ticking clock on the wall, the way Claire's hand trembled in mine. The oncologist spoke gently, but his words cut like glass. "It's stage 4, he said, his tone matter-of-fact but heavy. "The cancer has metastasized to multiple organs. At this point we can manage symptoms, but it's not curable." I felt my stomach twist. I wanted to interrupt, to ask what he meant by manage symptoms. But Claire didn't let me. She just nodded politely, as if he'd told her something trivial. That's who she was, graceful even in devastation. We drove home in silence that day. No radio, no conversation, just the sound of tires against the road and the occasional shaky breath from Claire. She stared out the window, and I could see her reflection, calm, resigned, and heartbreakingly beautiful. When we got home, she went straight to the bedroom. I followed her, unsure of what to do, what to say. I sat beside her on the bed, trying to process the weight of what we'd just heard. She turned to me and smiled a soft, tired smile. "It's okay," she whispered. "We'll take it one day at a time." I wanted to scream that it wasn't okay, that I wasn't ready to lose her, that Ava wasn't ready to lose her mother. But the words stayed stuck in my throat. We told Ava that evening over a video call. She was in her dorm room, her hair wrapped in a towel, still damp from a shower. She looked distracted. When I told her the diagnosis, there was a long pause. "Stage 4?" she repeated, her voice flat. Claire tried to lighten the tone, saying, "Don't worry, sweetheart, I'll be around for a while yet." Ava nodded but didn't say much. She mentioned a group project due next week, then promised to visit soon. After the call ended, Claire sat quietly, staring at the black screen. "She's in denial," she said softly. "She'll come around." I wanted to believe that. I really did. As the weeks passed, Claire's health began to decline. The chemo didn't help much. It drained her energy and took away the color from her cheeks. I took time off work to care for her. Every morning, I'd help her bathe, dress, and eat what little she could stomach. The once vibrant woman who filled our home with warmth was now confined to bed, her laughter replaced by weak smiles. Ava did come home briefly. She arrived one Friday afternoon, suitcase in hand, wearing sunglasses that hid her tired eyes. When she walked into the bedroom, Claire's face lit up like a candle. For a moment, it felt like everything was going to be okay. They hugged for a long time, both holding back tears. Ava sat with her for a while, holding her hand and promising to take time off school to help care for her. I felt a flicker of hope finally. Maybe she understood how serious this was. But after 2 days, I noticed her pulling away. She spent most of her time scrolling through her phone, messaging friends, and laughing at something on social media while her mother lay weak in bed beside her. It was as if she was trying to drown out the reality around her with digital noise. One night, I found her sitting in the kitchen, staring at her phone screen. "Dad," she said suddenly, "what if I took a short trip with my friends? Just a few days, you know? I need a break from all this sadness." Her words hit me like a slap. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "A break?" I said, my voice low but sharp. "Your mother's dying, Ava. This isn't something you take a break from." She frowned, defensive. "You don't understand. I can't sit here and watch her like this. It's killing me too." Before I could say another word, Claire called from the other room. She'd heard us. I went to her, ready to explain, but she just shook her head gently. Let her go, she whispered. If that's what she needs, let her go. I stared at her, stunned. You can't mean that. But she did. Claire was always compassionate, even when people didn't deserve it. Ava's young, she said. She's scared. Maybe she needs distance to come to terms with it. That night, I lay awake, listening to Claire's faint breathing beside me. I wanted to be angry at Ava, but a small part of me wondered if Claire was right. Maybe Ava's detachment was just her way of coping. The next morning, Ava brought it up again. She said her friends were planning a vacation to Hawaii, a week of beaches, sun, and mental reset, as she called it. She promised she'd stay in touch and be back before things got worse. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her as she scrolled through flight options on her phone, her voice filled with excitement. Meanwhile, Claire was in the bedroom, too weak to even sit up. Something inside me cracked that day. I wanted to shout, to forbid her from going, but Claire's words echoed in my mind. So I did. Against every instinct as a husband and father, I agreed. Ava hugged Claire before leaving, promising to call every day. I'll bring you something back, she said cheerfully. Claire smiled, weak but genuine, and whispered, just bring yourself back, sweetheart. As I watched Ava's taxi pull away from the driveway, I felt a hollowness I couldn't explain. The house was too quiet, too heavy. I went back inside and sat by Claire's bedside, holding her hand. She looked at me and said, she'll understand one day. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. But as the days turned into weeks, and Claire's condition worsened, that belief began to crumble. Ava sent photos from the beach, smiling, sun-kissed, carefree. Meanwhile, Claire's hands grew colder each night, her breaths shorter. That's when I realized something I never wanted to admit. Not every child knows how to love their parent in the way they deserve. And sometimes that realization comes too late. The evening Ava told me she was going to Hawaii still plays in my mind like a movie I can't turn off. She came into the living room, suitcase half-packed, her voice light and casual. Dad, she said. I booked the flight. We leave this weekend. I looked up from where I was sitting beside Claire, holding a damp cloth to her forehead. You what? I asked, thinking I must have misheard. I'm going to Hawaii with my friends, just for a week, she repeated, almost too casually, as if she were announcing she was grabbing coffee. Claire's breathing had been shallow all day. She could barely speak above a whisper. I turned to her, searching her face for a reaction. She didn't say a word. She just looked at Ava with eyes full of sorrow, an expression that said everything words couldn't. Ava, I said slowly, trying to steady my voice. Your mother's not doing well. You can see that. How can you even think about leaving now? She sighed, crossing her arms defensively. Dad, you don't get it. I can't handle this right now. I've been here for weeks watching her fade away, it's too much. I need to breathe. You need to breathe? I repeated, stunned. Your mother can barely breathe, Ava. She flinched, but her pride didn't let her back down. That's not fair, she said softly. You don't know what it's like for me. I felt anger bubbling in my chest, but before I could say anything else, Claire reached out and touched my hand. Her skin was paper-thin, cold. Let her go, she murmured. I turned to her, shocked. Claire, she needs to process this her own way. Claire interrupted, her voice calm but weak. We can't force her to stay out of guilt. But she should feel guilty, I said, my voice breaking. You're her mother. Claire smiled faintly. And I love her too much to make her hate herself. Let her go, Daniel. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Watching Claire defend Ava even now, when she could barely sit up, was both beautiful and unbearable. Later that night, after I'd helped Claire to bed, I found Ava in her room, sitting on the edge of her bed, scrolling through pictures of beaches and resorts. Do you even hear yourself? I asked quietly. You're planning a vacation while your mother is dying. Ava's eyes welled up, but she didn't cry. You think I don't know that? She said, her voice trembling. I can't stay here and watch her fade away like this. Every time I look at her, I feel like I'm drowning. I wanted to say that we were all drowning, that grief doesn't give anyone a free pass. But I stopped myself. Maybe she truly didn't know how to face it. Maybe this was her way of running from fear she couldn't name. I left her room without another word. That night, I lay awake beside Claire, staring at the ceiling. She was asleep, her breathing shallow but steady. I thought about Ava's laughter as a child, the way she used to crawl into our bed after a nightmare, whispering, "Mommy, Daddy, don't let anything bad happen." And now, here we were, something bad was happening, and she was running from it. 2 days later, Ava stood in the doorway, suitcase in hand. She looked beautiful and young, wearing a bright sundress that clashed painfully with the gloom in our house. Claire smiled weakly from her bed, her voice barely audible. "Take care of yourself, sweetheart," she said. "And call me, okay?" "I will," Ava said softly, kissing her mother's forehead. For a brief moment, I thought I saw guilt flicker across her face. But then it was gone, replaced by the same nervous determination she'd had for days. When she turned to me, I didn't speak. I just looked at her, my daughter, the person I'd raised to be kind and responsible, and felt something inside me falter. She hesitated, as if expecting me to say something. I didn't trust myself to speak without letting my anger spill out. The taxi honked outside. She mumbled a quick goodbye, grabbed her suitcase, and left. The sound of that door closing felt like the end of something sacred. I went back to the bedroom. Claire was crying quietly, tears rolling down her sunken cheeks. "She'll regret it," she whispered. "Someday she'll understand." I sat beside her and took her hand. "You're too forgiving," I said. "She doesn't deserve your kindness right now." Claire squeezed my hand weakly. "Love doesn't stop because someone disappoints you," she said. "You'll see." For the next week, the house felt emptier than ever. The only sounds were the quiet hum of the oxygen machine and the soft creak of the floorboards as I moved between the bedroom and the kitchen. Every night, I checked my phone, waiting for a call or message from Ava. She texted occasionally short, cheerful messages with pictures of palm trees, beaches, and cocktails. "Having a good time. The sunsets here are unreal." I read those words while wiping sweat from Claire's forehead, trying not to let the bitterness consume me. I wanted to reply, "Your mother can't even stand anymore." But I didn't. Claire made me promise not to make her feel worse. So I said nothing. Days turned into weeks. Claire's health deteriorated faster than anyone expected. The hospice nurse started coming by daily, her expression growing grimmer each time she left. One night, as I sat beside Claire, she reached out and touched my face. "Promise me something," she whispered. "Anything," I said. "When she comes back, don't hate her." My throat tightened. "Claire, please," she interrupted, her voice barely a whisper. "Promise me you'll love her through it." I nodded, though I didn't know if I could keep that promise. As I turned off the bedside lamp, the moonlight spilled through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. Claire was fading, piece by piece, and our daughter was thousands of miles away, smiling in photographs, her skin glowing from the Hawaiian sun. I sat in the dark that night, realizing with painful clarity that this was the moment our family stopped being whole. And deep down, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The final days of Claire's life were a blur of exhaustion, fear, and helplessness. Every morning, I woke to the sound of her coughing, a hollow, rattling sound that pierced the silence. She'd lost so much weight that I could see her collarbones clearly against her pale skin. Her hair, once thick and chestnut brown, now lay in fragile wisps against her pillow. But despite the frailty of her body, her spirit somehow remained unbroken. I remember one morning, I brought her a glass of water, and she smiled weakly. "You always bring me water like I'm royalty," she whispered, trying to tease me. I smiled back, though my heart felt like it was crumbling. "You are royalty," I said softly. "You always were." She laughed, a quiet sound that ended in a cough. I reached out instinctively to steady her, but she waved me off, as if still trying to protect me from the reality that she was fading. I spent my days caring for her, feeding her soup, adjusting her blankets, holding her hand as she drifted in and out of sleep. Sometimes, she'd wake up and whisper, "Is Ava back yet?" And every time, it broke something inside me to say no. I told her that Ava was fine, that she'd be home soon. But each time, my voice trembled a little more. I checked my phone constantly, hoping to see a message from our daughter, some sign that she was on her way. Instead, I saw photos of beaches, of bright cocktails, of sunsets over the ocean. Ava looked radiant, smiling, wide tan lines visible on her shoulders. In one picture, she was laughing with her friends, the caption reading, "Life's too short not to enjoy it." I threw my phone across the room that night. It hit the wall, shattering the screen. Claire, even in her weakness, heard the sound and called my name. I rushed back to her, ashamed. "I'm sorry," I said, sitting down beside her. I know," she whispered. "You're angry. You have every right to be." I nodded, unable to speak. I didn't want her last memories to be of me bitter and broken, but the anger was all-consuming. I couldn't understand how Ava could stay away when her mother was dying. The hospice nurse came by that week, a kind woman named Lydia. She'd seen this kind of pain before, families unraveling under the weight of death. She adjusted Claire's medications, helped me learn how to keep her comfortable, and reminded me gently to take breaks. But I couldn't leave Claire's side for more than a few minutes. Every time I did, I feared she might slip away without me there. One night, as the rain tapped against the window, Claire woke up suddenly and whispered, "Daniel?" "I'm here," I said immediately, taking her hand. She looked around the room, her eyes glassy. "Is Ava home?" My throat tightened. "No, sweetheart, not yet." She nodded slowly, her lips trembling. "She'll come when she's ready. She should be here now," I said bitterly. "You don't have much time left, Claire. She should be here." Claire gave a faint smile. "She's still my little girl," she said softly. "Even if she's lost right now." That night, I cried beside her. I hadn't cried like that since my father's funeral when I was a teenager. The kind of crying that comes from deep inside your chest, raw and uncontrollable. Claire held my hand, comforting me when she was the one in pain. That was who she was, selfless until the end. The next morning, she could barely speak. Her breathing had become shallow, uneven. Lydia came by and told me gently that it was time to call family, to say goodbyes. I nodded, though I didn't know who else to call. Claire's parents were gone, her siblings lived states away. The only person who truly mattered was thousands of miles away on a beach somewhere. I texted Ava one last time. My hands trembled as I typed, "Ava, it's bad. Please come home. She doesn't have much time left." Hours passed. No reply. That evening, Claire drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she murmured words I couldn't understand, sometimes she said Ava's name. I sat beside her, wiping her forehead, whispering prayers even though I hadn't prayed in years. Then, in the early hours of the morning, she opened her eyes one last time. "Daniel?" "I'm here," I said quickly, gripping her hand. "Promise me you'll tell her I love her," she whispered. "No matter what she did, no matter where she is, tell her I love her." Tears streamed down my face. "I promise." She smiled faintly. "Good," she said, her voice barely a breath. "Then I can rest now." Her fingers tightened once around mine, then slowly relaxed. Her chest rose once more and then didn't. The world went silent. I sat there, still holding her hand, refusing to believe what had just happened. I don't know how long I stayed that way. Eventually, Lydia came in, checked her pulse, and gave me a sorrowful nod. After they took her body away, I sat alone in the bedroom, staring at the empty bed. The air felt heavy, lifeless. Every corner of the house carried her scent, her memory. I looked down at my phone one last time. There was a new notification, a photo from Ava, time-stamped just an hour earlier. She was smiling under a palm tree, a flower tucked behind her ear. The caption read, "Feeling free." I dropped the phone to the floor and covered my face. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just heartbroken, I was ashamed. Ashamed of the daughter we'd raised, ashamed of the silence that now filled our home. That was the morning my wife died, and my faith in my family died with her. The morning of Claire's funeral was cold and gray, as if the world itself mourned her. I woke before dawn, though I hadn't really slept. The house felt foreign without her presence, every sound echoing through the emptiness. Her perfume still lingered faintly in the bedroom, and I sat on the edge of our bed for a long time, staring at the indentation where she used to lie. When I finally dressed in my black suit, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. My eyes were swollen, my face pale. I looked like someone who'd aged 10 years overnight. I went into the living room, glanced at Claire's urn on the mantel, and whispered, "I'll make today beautiful for you, Claire. I promise." Friends and family began to gather at the church an hour later. The soft murmur of condolences filled the air, mixed with the quiet sobs of people who had loved her. Claire had always been the heart of every gathering. She had a way of making people feel seen, remembered, loved. Now, the woman who once brought life to every room was gone, and all that remained was her absence. I stood at the entrance, greeting people with mechanical politeness. Everyone asked the same question, "Where's Ava?" I swallowed hard every time. "She couldn't make it," I said, forcing my voice to stay even. Some looked shocked, others just pitied me. I could see the judgment in their eyes. They didn't need to say what they were thinking. How could a daughter miss her own mother's funeral? Claire's best friend, Margaret, approached me and squeezed my hand gently. "She'll regret this, Daniel," she whispered. "One day she'll realize what she's done." I nodded, though I didn't respond. The truth was, I didn't know if Ava would ever understand the gravity of her choice. The service began shortly after. I sat in the front row, staring at the framed photograph of Claire resting beside her urn. It was a picture I'd taken years ago, her sitting in the garden, sunlight in her hair, smiling at something I'd said. She looked alive, warm, radiant. That's how I wanted to remember her. The pastor spoke softly, his words about love, loss, and eternal peace drifting through the air like distant echoes. I tried to listen, but my mind kept wandering to the empty seat beside me, the one that should have been Ava's. During the eulogy, I stood up to speak. My hands trembled as I approached the podium. I had written and rewritten my words the night before, but when I looked out over the faces in the crowd, my notes felt meaningless. "I met Claire when I was 23, I began, my voice breaking slightly. "She was the kindest, most patient soul I ever knew. She believed in people, even when they didn't believe in themselves. She taught me that love isn't about grand gestures, it's about the small, everyday things. The laughter at dinner, the morning coffee, the way she'd hum while doing laundry. Those moments, they were everything." A lump rose in my throat, and I had to stop. I took a deep breath before continuing. She was my compass, my calm in every storm. And even at the end, when she was in pain, she was more worried about comforting us than herself. The congregation was silent. Some wept quietly. I paused and looked at Claire's photo. "Claire, if you can hear me, I'll keep your promise. I'll take care of Ava. Even when I don't understand her. Even when I'm angry. Because I know that's what you'd want." My voice cracked on her name. I stepped back from the podium, feeling my chest tighten as the reality hit me again. She was gone, and I was standing alone in the ruins of what used to be our family. After the service, people came up to offer condolences. Some hugged me, others just gave sympathetic nods. Every word of comfort blurred together until it all felt hollow. The only words that lingered were the ones not spoken, the ones that asked silently, "Where was your daughter?" When everyone finally left, I stayed behind. The church was quiet now, sunlight streaming through stained glass, casting soft colors on the floor. I walked to the urn, placed my hand gently on the table, and whispered, "I did my best, Claire." As I turned to leave, I noticed Claire's favorite lilies in the corner. Margaret had brought them. I took one and held it tightly as I walked out into the parking lot. The scent reminded me of Claire's hair, of the mornings she'd wake before me and start the day humming. Back home, the silence was unbearable. I made tea, though I didn't drink it. I sat on the couch, staring at nothing. My phone lay face up on the coffee table. No messages, no calls. Just the fractured reflection of my face in the dark screen. Hours later, as the sun began to set, I finally heard the familiar ding of a notification. My heart leapt for a second. Maybe. Finally, Ava had texted. I grabbed the phone with shaking hands. It was her. A picture filled the screen, a clear blue sky, palm trees swaying in the background, Ava smiling brightly. The caption read, "Wish you were here." I stared at the image until my vision blurred with tears. My chest tightened as I whispered to the empty room. I wish you were here too, Ava. But not there. Here where your mother needed you. That night, I sat by the urn, the house dim except for the flicker of a single candle. I spoke to Claire as if she could hear me. I told her about the service, about the flowers, about the people who missed her. Then, as the candlelight danced across her urn, I said the one truth that had been building inside me since the day she passed. I don't know if I can ever forgive her, Claire. Not for this. My voice cracked, and the room seemed to answer with silence. But in that silence, somewhere deep inside, I could almost hear Claire's voice whisper back the same gentle tone she always used when I was angry. Love her anyway. I closed my eyes, clutching the lily in my hand, and let the tears fall. Because even though I wanted to hate Ava, I knew Claire was right. Love doesn't disappear just because someone breaks your heart, it lingers, waiting to be healed, no matter how impossible that feels. It was nearly 2 weeks after the funeral when Ava finally came home. I'll never forget. The moment she walked through the door, sun-kissed, smiling, and utterly unaware of the wreckage she was stepping into. I was sitting in the living room, staring at the urn on the mantel, when I heard the familiar creak of the front door opening. "Dad?" Her voice called out cheerfully, as if she were returning from a casual weekend away. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. I sat frozen, my hands clenched around the armrest of the chair. Then I turned to see her standing in the doorway, wearing a floral dress, her skin bronzed from the sun, a suitcase at her side. "Hey," she said brightly, her smile fading slightly when she saw my expression. "I'm back." Her eyes darted around the room, scanning for something or someone. When her gaze landed on the urn above the fireplace, she froze. The color drained from her face. What is that?" she whispered. I didn't answer immediately. I wanted her to see it for herself, to let the truth settle in without me softening it. She stepped closer, her voice shaking. "Is that?" "Yes," I said quietly. "Your mother." Her breath caught. "No," she whispered, her voice cracking. "No, that's not possible. You didn't tell me it was that bad." I stood up slowly, every muscle in my body trembling with restrained anger. "Ava, I texted you. I called. I begged you to come home. You ignored every message." She shook her head violently. "No, I didn't see." "Yes, you did," I snapped. My voice echoed through the room, sharp and cold. "You saw them. You were too busy smiling for pictures on a beach to care." Tears filled her eyes. "That's not true," she said, her voice breaking. "I just thought, you thought she'd wait for you," I interrupted. "You thought you had time." Ava dropped to her knees, covering her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook as she cried, her sobs raw and jagged. For a moment I wanted to reach out, to comfort her. But I couldn't. The wound was too deep, the anger too heavy. She stayed like that for a long time, kneeling on the living room floor, crying at the feet of her mother's ashes. Finally, she looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "Why didn't you wait to tell me until after I came back? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I stared at her in disbelief. "Wait to tell you?" "Ava, she was dying. We didn't have the luxury of time." Her voice rose, desperate. "I didn't know it was this soon. You should have made me understand." Something inside me snapped. Made you understand? I said quietly, the anger returning to my voice. You're an adult, Ava. I didn't think I needed to make you understand what dying means. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw guilt consume her completely. She looked back at the urn, her lip trembling. She wanted me there, she whispered. She needed me. Yes, I said softly. She did. Her sobs grew quieter then, almost like a child's. She reached out and touched the urn gently, her hand shaking. I'm sorry, Mom, she whispered through her tears. I'm so sorry. That night, she didn't sleep. Neither did I. She stayed in her old room, and I could hear her crying through the walls. Every sob was a reminder of everything we'd lost, of what she'd taken from herself by not being there. In the morning, she came into the kitchen. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen. She sat down at the table and whispered, "What was it like? At the end?" I hesitated. "Peaceful," I said finally. She wasn't in pain. Ava nodded, tears welling again. Did she ask about me?" I took a long breath before answering. Every day. That was the truth that broke her. She covered her mouth and began to cry again, this time in silence. I wanted to tell her that Claire had forgiven her, that she'd died with love, not resentment. But the words wouldn't come. I wasn't ready to speak forgiveness, not yet. For the next few days, Ava tried to act normal. She cleaned the house, cooked meals, and followed me around, looking for signs that I still cared about her. I answered her questions politely but never warmly. The distance between us was palpable. One evening, I found her sitting on the couch, holding one of Claire's scarves to her face. "I can still smell her," she whispered. "It doesn't feel real that she's gone." I nodded but said nothing. I was afraid that if I spoke, all my anger would spill out again. Then she asked, "Do you hate me, Dad?" I froze. The question hung in the air like smoke. I didn't know how to answer. I didn't hate her, but I couldn't say I didn't resent her. Finally, I said, "I don't hate you, Ava, but right now, I don't know how to look at you without seeing her empty hand." She broke down again, her tears silent this time. That night, as I sat in the dark living room, I heard her quietly open the door to Claire's room. I didn't stop her. She stayed there for hours, sitting by the empty bed, whispering apologies to the air. The next morning she was gone. Her suitcase, the same one she'd brought home from Hawaii, was missing. On the kitchen table was a note, written in her shaky handwriting. "Dad, I can't stay here. The walls are screaming with memories and I can't breathe. I don't deserve to. Please don't come after me. I'll write when I can. I'm sorry." I stood there, reading it over and over, my heart hollowing out with every word. Ava had run from her grief once, and now, she was running from it again. Only this time, I wasn't sure she'd ever come back. The days that followed Ava's second disappearance felt eerily quiet, almost unbearable. The house had already felt empty after Claire passed, but now it was silent in a different way, like a wound that refused to close. Every room carried a ghost. Claire's laughter, Ava's footsteps, the smell of dinners we once shared, it all haunted me. At first, I tried to convince myself Ava just needed time. She had said she'd write, and I wanted to believe her. But as the days stretched into weeks, the silence became heavier. I checked the mailbox every morning, hoping for a letter. Nothing came. No texts, no calls. The world had swallowed my daughter whole. I tried to distract myself with routine, waking up early, going back to work, cooking dinner for one. The motions of life continued, but I wasn't living. I was merely existing. My coworkers were kind, though their pitying glances were almost worse than my loneliness. I could tell they didn't know what to say to a man who'd lost his wife and, in a way, his daughter too. Every night, I sat in the living room, staring at the urn on the mantel. Sometimes I spoke aloud, telling Claire about my day as if she could still hear me. "I made your pasta again today," I'd say softly. "It didn't taste right. I think I forgot something. Maybe your magic touch." It was during one of those quiet evenings that I heard the front door creak open. My heart stopped. I stood up, half afraid it was a dream. But then I heard it, a familiar, trembling voice. "Dad?" Ava stood in the doorway, her eyes red and swollen. She looked thinner, her shoulders hunched under the weight of guilt. "Can I come in?" she asked. For a moment, I couldn't move. Then I nodded and stepped aside. She walked in slowly, glancing around as if afraid the house itself would reject her. Her gaze lingered on the urn, and tears filled her eyes again. "I shouldn't have left," she whispered. I thought I could handle it, but I couldn't. I said nothing. Part of me wanted to embrace her, but another part wanted to shout, to make her feel the pain she'd caused. Instead, I simply gestured toward the couch. She sat down, clutching one of the pillows like it was a lifeline. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she began, her voice trembling. "I can't stop thinking about her. Every night, I see her face. I dream that she's calling for me. And I can't reach her. I hate myself for what I did." Her words hit me harder than I expected. The anger I'd been clinging to started to dissolve, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. But I couldn't forgive her, not yet. "Your mother loved you more than anything," I said quietly. "Even at the end, she defended you. She made me promise not to hate you." Ava's face crumpled. "She shouldn't have. I deserve it. No one deserves hate," I said, though my tone lacked warmth. "But forgiveness, that has to be earned." For the next few weeks, Ava stayed. She cooked dinner, cleaned the house, tried to fill the silence with conversation. I could tell she was trying to make things right, but the distance between us remained like an invisible wall. Every word we spoke was cautious, every gesture careful. Sometimes, I caught her standing in Claire's room, holding one of her mother's scarves, tears streaming down her face. I'd walk past without saying anything. There were still too many unsaid words between us. One night, we sat at the table eating in silence when she suddenly spoke. "Dad, do you think Mom would forgive me?" I looked at her for a long time before answering. "She already did." Ava nodded slowly, tears in her eyes. "Then why can't I forgive myself?" I didn't have an answer. I knew what guilt could do. It could rot you from the inside out, leaving you hollow and afraid to feel anything else. Over the following months, Ava's presence in the house grew quieter. She stopped trying to talk so much, stopped forcing herself into my space. She would spend long hours sitting on the porch, staring at nothing. I often found her journal open on the kitchen counter, filled with half-written pages about regret and grief. Then, one night, I woke to the sound of muffled sobs. I went to her room and found her curled up on the bed, clutching a photo of her and Claire at the beach from years ago. Her voice was broken when she whispered, "I wish I could trade places with her." I sat beside her and rested my hand on her shoulder. "Don't say that," I murmured. "Your mother wouldn't want that. She wouldn't want this either," Ava said bitterly, turning to face me. "She wouldn't want us pretending everything's fine when it's not." She was right. We weren't fine. We were two broken people trapped in the same house, each grieving in our own way, unable to reach each other through the fog of pain. A few days later, I came home from work to find the house eerily still. Ava's shoes were gone from the doorway. I called her name, checked every room. Her phone was gone. Her clothes, too. On the kitchen table, there was another note. "Dad, I can't stay here anymore. The guilt is eating me alive. Every wall in this house reminds me of what I did. I don't know where I'm going, but I need to go somewhere where I can breathe again. Please don't come after me. I love you." The words blurred as I read them, my chest tightening. I sat at the table, the note trembling in my hands. That night, I reported her missing. The police took the report, though I could see the doubt in their eyes. "Adults leave all the time," they said. She'd probably reach out soon. But days passed, then weeks, with no word. I told myself I was done chasing after her. But the truth was, I checked my phone every few hours anyway, waiting for a message that never came. The house, once again, was silent, only this time. It wasn't grief that filled the air. It was something colder, something that felt like the slow death of hope. And though I didn't know it then, this silence was only the beginning of the reckoning to come. Ava wasn't gone forever, but when she returned again, she wouldn't be the same person I once knew. When I realized Ava was gone, really gone, my first reaction wasn't anger, it was exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that seeps into your bones and makes even breathing feel heavy. I stared at her empty room for a long time that morning, taking in the neatly made bed, the open window, the faint smell of her shampoo lingering in the air. There was no sign of struggle, no hint of panic, just absence. On her desk was a note, short and unevenly written. "Dad, I can't stay here, I need to find myself. Please don't worry, I'll be okay, I love you." The handwriting told me everything. It was rushed, desperate. She hadn't planned this carefully, she'd simply reached a breaking point. For the first few days, I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to drive around aimlessly, searching for her car on every highway. Another part of me just sat. I'd pick up my phone, scroll through her last texts, reread her apologies, and feel a hollow ache in my chest. After 2 weeks of silence, I went to the police station. The officer who took my statement was kind but pragmatic. "She's an adult, sir," he said gently. "There's only so much we can do unless we suspect foul play." I nodded, even though my heart screamed otherwise. Ava wasn't the kind of person to vanish completely. For all her mistakes, she always came back eventually. But this time felt different. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. I returned to work out of necessity, but I was barely there. My colleagues avoided asking questions, they could see the pain written all over me. I'd come home to the same silent house every night, eat dinner alone, and stare at the front door, waiting for it to open. One evening, about 3 months after she'd left, I was sorting through some of Claire's old things when I found the box of letters she used to keep birthday cards. Old notes from friends, and a few from me. It hit me then how much Claire had loved the written word. She believed letters carried the soul of a burmesser, a person, in a way that texts or calls never could. That night, I sat down and wrote Ava a letter of my own. I didn't even know where to send it, but it felt necessary. I told her I wasn't angry anymore, that I just wanted to know she was alive. I told her her mother would forgive her, and that somewhere, I believed she still could forgive herself too. I didn't expect a reply. But a month later, a letter came. There was no return address, no clear postmark. Just my name scrawled on the front in familiar handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. "Dad," it began. "I'm alive. I'm sorry it took me this long to write. I've been staying in a small coastal town a few states away. I found a part-time job at a bookstore. It's quiet here, peaceful in a way that hurts. I think about Mom every day, sometimes I dream of her. In my dreams, she's sitting by the ocean, smiling at me. But when I try to walk toward her, she turns away. I wake up crying. I felt my throat tighten as I read on. I can't come home yet. I'm not ready to face the house or you or her room. Every time I picture it, I feel like I can't breathe. I want to be better before I see you again. Please believe me when I say I'm trying. I'm trying so hard. I just don't know who I am without her." At the bottom of the page, she'd drawn a small heart the same way she used to when she was a child leaving notes for Claire. I read that letter at least 10 times. Each word tore me apart and mended me in the same breath. For the first time in months, I felt something that wasn't bitterness. It was relief she was alive. But there was something else in her words, something that unsettled me. A kind of hopelessness that didn't sound like healing, it sounded like penance. Like she didn't believe she deserved to come home. Over the following months, a few more letters arrived. Never regularly, sometimes 2 weeks apart, sometimes 2 months. Each one carried the same tone of quiet sorrow. She told me about her tiny apartment near the shore, how she spent her days shelving books and her evenings walking along the water. She said she often imagined Claire beside her, laughing at the waves. In one letter she wrote, "Sometimes I think Mom visits me in my dreams, but she never forgives me. She just looks at me with that sad smile, and I wake up feeling like I've failed her all over again." Those words chilled me to the core. I wanted to drive there, to find her, but she never included enough information. It was as if she wanted to be found but didn't believe she should be. One night, I sat on the porch with a cup of cold coffee, reading her letters again. The stars were out, the night silent, except for the wind. And that's when I realized something strange. Her last letter ended abruptly. Mid-sentence. "Sometimes, Dad. I think maybe it would be better if I just..." That was it. No ending. No signature. Just a sentence that trailed off into nothing. I felt my chest tighten. I looked at the envelope again, desperate for a clue, but there was none. The postmark was smudged. I didn't know when it had been sent. That night, I barely slept. I kept imagining her by the ocean, staring out into the dark waves, thinking about her mother, thinking about all she'd done. And for the first time since Claire's death, a new fear took hold of me, not of loss, but of permanence. That maybe Ava's grief wasn't something she could outlive. I didn't know it then, but the next letter I would receive from her wouldn't bring relief. It would carry a secret that would change everything I thought I knew about my daughter. When Ava's next letter arrived, it was on a quiet Tuesday morning in early spring. I remember because I was outside tending to the small garden Claire had planted years ago. The mail truck pulled up, the driver gave a polite nod, and in his hand was a single envelope with my name written in Ava's familiar handwriting. It had been nearly 6 weeks since her last one, the one that ended mid-sentence. My hands trembled as I took it. The envelope was slightly damp, the ink smudged in one corner. I stood there for a long time before I could bring myself to open it. Inside, the paper smelled faintly of sea salt, as if it had been written by the ocean itself. "Dad," the letter began, "I don't even know how to start this one. I almost didn't write at all. I'm not sure if writing helps me anymore or just makes me remember what I'm trying so hard to forget." I swallowed hard and kept reading. "I've been having the dreams again. Mom sitting by the water, her face soft, her eyes calm. I always try to reach her, but she turns away. I think she's telling me that I still don't deserve her forgiveness. I don't blame her. I don't deserve yours either." I felt a familiar ache rise in my chest. "I've been living in a small coastal town called Mariner's Bay. There's a bookstore here where I work part-time. The owner, Lydia, is kind. She doesn't ask questions. She lets me read when there are no customers. I find peace in stories where people get second chances. Maybe that's why I stay." It was the first time she'd mentioned where she was, and I felt a rush of something I hadn't felt in months: hope. I finally had a place, a real location, a way to find her. But then, as I read further, that hope began to twist into fear. Sometimes I think about coming home, but every time I start packing, I panic. The idea of walking into that house and seeing the urn, it's too much. I can't face Mom's ghost, even though she's the only person I want to see. I hear her voice in my head when I walk along the beach. She says, "Ava, you can't run from love." But Dad, that's exactly what I've been doing. Running. From her. From myself. I sat down heavily on the porch step, reading each line with my heart in my throat. Then came the part that made my hands go numb. "There's something I need to tell you, something I've never said out loud. I didn't just go to Hawaii for a break. I went because I was angry. Angry at Mom for getting sick. Angry at life for making me feel helpless. I thought if I left, if I ignored it, maybe it wouldn't be real. Maybe when I came back, everything would still be the same. I know how selfish that sounds, but it's the truth. I went to escape reality, and now that I'm living in it, I can't escape the guilt." I stopped reading for a moment. My vision blurred with tears I hadn't felt coming. All this time, I'd thought she was heartless, detached, but underneath it all, she had been terrified. A scared young woman who didn't know how to face death, so she ran from it. The letter continued. "I think Mom knew. I think she understood me better than I understood myself. The night before she died, I felt this weight, like something inside me cracked. I woke up crying, and I didn't even know why. Now I think it was her. I think somehow she said goodbye without words." I closed my eyes, clutching the letter to my chest. Claire had always been the emotional core of our family, deeply intuitive, connected to Ava in a way that I never fully grasped. Maybe she really had said goodbye that night, and Ava had felt it miles away. I turned to the last page. The handwriting grew shakier. Dad, there's one more thing. I've been seeing someone a counselor Lydia recommended. She says I need to forgive myself, but I don't think I can. How do you forgive the person who didn't show up when it mattered most? Every time I start to feel better, I remember the way Mom used to look at me, and I fall apart all over again. I want to come home, but I'm scared you'll hate me when you see me. I'm scared you'll look at me and see the girl who wasn't there when Mom needed her. I read the final lines out loud, my voice breaking. If you can still love me after everything, please write back. If not, I'll understand. Just know that no matter what, I love you. I love you and Mom more than I've ever been able to say. The letter ended there. No return address, just the faint outline of her tear stains on the paper. I sat in silence for what felt like hours. The sound of wind rustled through the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a bird called. For the first time in years, I prayed not for forgiveness, but for another chance. For both of us. That night, I wrote her back. My handwriting was uneven from the shaking of my hands. I told her I didn't hate her. I told her she didn't need to earn forgiveness, it was already hers. I told her that her mother would be proud of her for finally facing her pain. Then I mailed the letter the next morning, even though I didn't know where it would end up. I sent it to the town she mentioned, Mariner's Bay, hoping someone at the post office would know where to deliver it. Weeks passed. No reply. Then, one evening, as I was locking up the house, I heard the faint rustle of an envelope slide through the mail slot. My heart stopped. I picked it up, and there it was again, Ava's handwriting. The first line read, "I got your letter, Dad. Thank you for not giving up on me." I sank to my knees right there by the door, tears falling freely for the first time since Claire's death. But the final line of her letter sent a chill through me so sharp it stole my breath. "I'm coming home soon, but before I do, there's something you need to know about what really happened in Hawaii." When I read Ava's last line, "There's something you need to know about what really happened in Hawaii," my heart clenched. The words stayed in my mind for days, echoing like a warning. I didn't know what she meant, but I couldn't shake the sense that it was something dark, something that had been eating away at her ever since she left. A week passed, then another. No new letters came. No calls, no sign of her return. I tried to convince myself that maybe she'd changed her mind, that she needed more time before coming home. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. That letter had sounded final, like a confession before a disappearance. So I made a decision. For months, I'd waited for Ava to come back to me. This time, I was going to her. I packed a small bag, filled the gas tank, and started driving toward Mariner's Bay, the little coastal town she'd mentioned in her letter. It was hundreds of miles away, but distance didn't matter. I had lost too much already. The road stretched out before me in long, winding silence. Mile after mile, I had only my thoughts for company. The hum of the tires on asphalt became a strange comfort. I thought about Claire, about the way she'd smiled even when she was sick, and about her last request. "Promise me you'll love her through it." I had failed that promise. At least for a while. I had let my anger build a wall between us. But as I drove, I realized I was ready to keep that promise no matter what I found on the other side. After nearly 10 hours of driving, I reached Mariner's Bay just as the sun was setting. It was a small town, the kind of place where everyone seemed to know each other. Seagulls cried overhead, and the air carried the smell of salt and fish. The main street was lined with tiny shops and weathered signs. It felt peaceful, yet there was an undercurrent of loneliness that hung in the air. I parked outside the only bookstore I could find, Seaside Reads. The display window showed stacks of old novels and a small handwritten sign that read, "Open until 6." I checked my watch, 5:45. When I stepped inside, a small bell above the door chimed. The smell of paper and coffee filled the air. Behind the counter stood a woman in her 50s. Glasses perched on the edge of her nose. She looked up and smiled. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for someone," I said, my voice hesitant. "My daughter. Her name's Ava." The woman's expression softened. "You must be her father," she said quietly. Relief flooded through me. "So you know her?" "Yes." She nodded. "I'm Lydia. She's been working here for about 6 months. Sweet girl, quiet though, carries a sadness with her." I felt my throat tighten. "Is she here now?" Lydia's smile faded. "No. She left early today. Said she wasn't feeling well. She's been pale lately. Weak. I told her to see a doctor, but you know how young people are." My heart dropped. "Do you know where she's staying?" Lydia hesitated before writing down an address on a small piece of paper. "She rents a room in a cottage by the water. You can't miss it. Blue shutters, white fence. Just down the road past the lighthouse." I thanked her and left, the paper shaking in my hands. When I found the cottage, the sky was darkening, and the sound of waves crashing against rocks filled the air. A soft light glowed from inside the window. I stood there for a moment, suddenly afraid. I didn't know what I was walking into, whether Ava would welcome me or shut the door in my face. Finally, I knocked. The door opened slowly, and there she was. She looked fragile, thinner than I remembered, her skin pale against the loose sweater she wore. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Dad?" "Hey, kiddo," I said, my voice breaking. She covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. "You came. I told you I would," I whispered. She stepped aside, and I walked in. The cottage was small but cozy, books everywhere, a half-drunk cup of tea on the table, and the sound of soft waves outside the window. I noticed a blanket draped over the couch and a photo of Claire on the mantel. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Ava said quietly, "I didn't think you'd come for me." I looked at her and shook my head. "I couldn't not come." She started to cry, covering her face with her hands. I walked to her and pulled her into a hug. For the first time in years, I felt her body shake against mine, not from defiance, but from raw emotion. We sat together for hours, talking. She told me about the bookstore, about Lydia, about how she spent her evenings watching the ocean because it made her feel closer to her mother. She confessed she still had nightmares, dreams where Claire called her name but turned away before she could answer. "I think it's her way of saying she's still waiting for me to make things right," Ava whispered. "You already have," I said softly, "just by surviving." She shook her head. "I haven't told you everything." Her voice was trembling. But before she could go on, she started coughing deep, heavy coughs that left her breathless. I reached for her instinctively. "You okay?" She nodded weakly. "Yeah, it's just been happening a lot lately." "Have you seen a doctor?" She hesitated before saying, "No, I don't want to. I don't deserve to worry about myself after everything I did." I grabbed her shoulders. "Don't say that. You deserve to live, Ava. Your mother would want that." She looked at me with red, tired eyes. "You sound like her," she whispered. For a moment, we just sat there in silence, the sound of the waves filling the space between us. I realized then how much she'd changed, how much life had already taken from her. That night, I promised her we'd get her help, that we'd face whatever came next together. She nodded, a small flicker of hope lighting her face. But as I tucked her in before leaving for my hotel, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. A bottle of prescription pills half empty on the nightstand, the label smudged and faded. Something told me that what Ava had to tell me about Hawaii wasn't just emotional, it was physical. Something had followed her home, something she'd been hiding for far too long. And I wasn't sure either of us was ready for the truth. The next morning, I drove back to Ava's cottage just after sunrise. The air was heavy with mist from the ocean, and a faint chill clung to everything. I brought coffee and bagels, thinking she'd still be asleep, but when I knocked, she answered right away. She looked even weaker than the night before. Her eyes had dark circles beneath them, her lips pale, and her hands trembled as she opened the door. "Morning," I said softly, forcing a smile. "I brought breakfast." She tried to smile back, but her voice was hoarse. "Thanks, Dad. I didn't sleep much." I set the food down on the table and watched as she poured herself some coffee. Her hand shook so badly that she spilled a few drops. I reached over to steady the cup, but she pulled away. I'm fine, she murmured. I studied her face too thin, too tired, and said quietly, "No, you're not. You've been coughing for weeks, haven't you?" She froze. "It's just stress," she said quickly, avoiding my eyes. "Stress doesn't make you this pale," I said, my tone firm. "And it doesn't make you lose weight like this." Her shoulders slumped, and for a moment, she looked like a child again. "I didn't want to worry you," she whispered. "Ava," I said gently, "you don't have to protect me anymore. I already lost one person I love to sickness. I'm not going to lose another because you're too scared to see a doctor." Her eyes filled with tears. "What if it's something bad?" "Then, we'll face it together," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She nodded slowly, defeated. Later that morning, I drove her to the local clinic. She was quiet the whole ride, staring out the window, her fingers gripping the seatbelt tightly. When we arrived, she took a deep breath and whispered, "I hate hospitals. They smell like endings." Inside, the doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Patel, listened carefully as Ava explained her symptoms: constant fatigue, shortness of breath, night sweats, and that relentless cough. Dr. Patel ordered blood work and a chest scan. When the results came back later that afternoon, the doctor's expression told me everything before she spoke. She sighed softly, then looked at Ava with compassion. "You have an autoimmune condition," she said gently. "It's called systemic lupus. It's not terminal, but it's serious. Your immune system is attacking your own body. That's why you're weak. Why you've been coughing. It's affecting your lungs." Ava's lips trembled. "Is it my fault?" she asked quietly. Dr. Patel shook her head. "No, sweetheart. It's no one's fault. But it's made worse by stress and emotional strain. You've been through a lot. That can trigger flare-ups." Ava's eyes filled with tears, and she turned toward me. "See?" she whispered. "It's my punishment. My heart broke." "No," I said firmly, taking her hand. "It's not punishment. It's just life being cruel. It doesn't mean you deserve it." She didn't answer. She just looked down at her lap, her shoulders shaking as silent tears fell. We spent the rest of the day in the hospital, running tests and getting her prescriptions. When we finally got back to the cottage, she collapsed onto the couch, exhausted. I made soup, just like Claire used to when someone was sick, but Ava barely touched it. That night, I sat by her as she slept, listening to the sound of her labored breathing. I thought of Claire, how I'd watched her fade, how helpless I'd felt. I couldn't go through that again. Not with Ava. Not when I'd only just found her again. The next few weeks were slow and heavy. Ava's health fluctuated. Some days she seemed stronger, others she could barely get out of bed. I stayed in town, helping her with meals, taking her to appointments, reminding her to take her medication. She hated feeling dependent, but she didn't fight me much. One evening, as the sun set behind the ocean, she sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket. I brought her tea, and she smiled faintly. "You remember when Mom used to make tea and force me to drink it when I was sick?" I chuckled. She said tea could fix anything. Ava's expression softened. She was right. It always made me feel like home. We sat in silence for a while, watching the waves. Then she said quietly, "Dad, there's something I haven't told you yet." I turned to her, alert. "What is it?" Her voice trembled. "It's about Hawaii." My chest tightened. "You mentioned that in your letter. What happened there, Ava?" She hesitated, eyes glistening in the dim light. "Something went wrong," she whispered. "Something that changed everything." I waited, but she looked away, her lips trembling. "Not yet," she said finally. "I'll tell you soon. I need to be ready." I nodded slowly, knowing I couldn't push her, not when she was this fragile. That night, she couldn't sleep. I could hear her crying softly in the next room. Every instinct in me wanted to comfort her, but I knew she was carrying a kind of pain that words couldn't touch. The next morning, she was quiet again, lost in her thoughts. As she sat by the window, She said softly, "You know what hurts the most? Mom forgave me before I even asked. But I can't forgive myself. And now this illness, it feels like it's her way of reminding me that guilt doesn't just disappear." I sat beside her and took her hand. "No," I said. "It's not guilt that's doing this to you. It's love that hasn't found peace yet. That's what's eating you inside." She looked at me, her eyes glassy with tears. "Then help me find peace, Dad. Please." "I will," I said, my throat tightening. "But first, you have to tell me everything. When you're ready." She nodded slowly, her fingers tightening around mine. As the waves crashed outside, I realized something. This illness, this pain, it wasn't just hers. It was ours. The grief that had fractured our family was still living inside both of us, festering in the places where love used to be simple. And I knew then that whatever secret she was hiding from Hawaii wasn't just her burden to bear anymore, it was mine too. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that her confession would reopen wounds I thought had already healed, and change the way I remembered both her and Claire forever. A week later, Ava finally decided she was ready to talk. I could tell by the look in her eyes that whatever she was about to say had been haunting her for a long time. We were sitting on the porch that evening, the sea breeze carrying the faint scent of salt and pine. The waves crashed softly in the distance, and the horizon was painted in fading gold. She had been quiet all day, her hands trembling as she folded the same napkin over and over. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Dad, there's something I have to tell you about Hawaii." My stomach tightened. "I'm listening," I said gently. She stared down at her hands. "It wasn't just a vacation. Not really. I told you I went there to get away from the sadness, but that's not the whole truth." She paused, her eyes glassy with tears. "I went there because I didn't want to face the reality that Mom was dying. I thought, if I could just be somewhere far away, where nobody knew me, I could pretend it wasn't happening." I stayed silent, giving her the space she needed to continue. She wiped her face, took a shaky breath, and went on. "The first few days were fun. The beaches, the sun, the laughter, it was everything I thought I needed. I told myself I deserved a break, that I could deal with Mom's illness when I got back. But then one night," she trailed off, swallowing hard. "One night, I got a call from you. I remembered that call vividly. I had called her after Claire had taken a turn for the worse, my voice shaking, begging her to come home. She hadn't answered. She looked up at me, guilt etched across her face. I saw your name on my phone. I knew what it meant. I knew if I picked up, I'd have to face the truth. And I didn't want to. So I turned it off." Her voice broke on the last word. Tears streamed down her face as she continued. "I went back to the beach that night, pretending everything was fine. My friends were laughing, music was playing, but I couldn't hear any of it. I just stared at the water, and suddenly I felt sick, like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't come back from. Deep down, I knew Mom was gone." She pressed her hand to her chest, her breathing uneven. "The next morning, when I finally turned my phone back on, I saw your messages. I saw that she'd died. And I fell apart. I remember running down to the ocean, just screaming her name into the waves. People stared, but I didn't care. I'd done the one thing she asked me not to. I wasn't there when she needed me. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't interrupt her. Her pain poured out like a flood that had been held back too long. I tried to come home right away," she said, her voice shaking. "But when I got to the airport, I couldn't. I just sat there, crying in the terminal, staring at the ticket in my hand. I was terrified to face you, terrified to see what I'd done, so I stayed another day, then another. I told myself you'd hate me, and that I deserved it. By the time I finally flew home, it was too late." She looked up at me then, her eyes raw and red. "That's the truth, Dad. I wasn't just careless, I was selfish. I thought I could run from pain, but it followed me anyway. I thought ignoring it would make it easier, but it only made everything worse." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. I felt both fury and heartbreak twisting inside me. Fury at the choices she'd made, but heartbreak for the child she still was inside, trying to navigate grief the only way she knew how. When I finally found my voice, I said quietly, "You were young, Ava. Scared. You made a mistake. But you've been punishing yourself ever since. Your mother would never want that." She shook her head violently. "Don't make excuses for me, Dad. I abandoned her. And you. I don't deserve forgiveness." I reached out, placing my hand gently over hers. "You don't have to deserve forgiveness, Ava. That's not how love works." Her tears came harder. She told me once that love is staying, even when it's hard. I didn't stay. I left. I nodded, my own eyes burning. "And yet you came back. That's what matters now. You came back." She looked at me then, and something in her broke. She sobbed openly, leaning into my chest like she hadn't done since she was a little girl. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her tightly, feeling the weight of years of pain between us. For the first time since Claire's death, I let myself cry too. Not just for my wife, but for my daughter, for everything we'd both lost, and everything we were still trying to salvage. When her tears finally subsided, she whispered, "Do you forgive me?" I pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "I forgave you a long time ago," I said softly. "I just didn't know how to tell you." She let out a shaky breath and closed her eyes, as if the words themselves lifted something heavy from her soul. We sat there in silence for a while, the sound of the ocean steady and endless. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the first stars were beginning to appear. After a long pause, Ava whispered, "Do you think Mom can hear us?" "I do," I said. "And I think she's proud of you." She smiled faintly through her tears. "I hope so. I've missed her so much, Dad." "I know," I said, squeezing her hand. "So have I." That night, for the first time in years, Ava slept peacefully. And for the first time in a long time, I dreamed of Claire not frail or fading but vibrant and smiling, her arms open. When I woke, I realized something that stayed with me. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it just allows love to exist alongside it. And maybe that was enough. In the weeks after Ava's confession, life began to settle into something that resembled calm. It wasn't normal, not the way things had been before, but it was softer, more forgiving. She had started taking her medication regularly, eating more, even smiling now and then. I'd catch her humming quietly while she made tea or folding laundry. And every time, it reminded me of Claire. We'd developed a routine. Morning walks by the beach, afternoons at the bookstore, evenings cooking dinner together. The silence that used to hang between us now felt peaceful instead of heavy. Ava still had hard days, days when the guilt crept back in, but she faced them instead of running from them. One morning, after we'd finished breakfast, I said, "You should come with me into town. I need to grab a few things." She smiled faintly. "You just want company." I chuckled. "Maybe. Is that such a crime?" We drove into the small coastal town, the sunlight spilling across the ocean to our right. Ava rolled down the window and let the breeze hit her face. It was the first time in months I'd seen her truly relaxed. When we arrived at the farmer's market, the smell of fresh bread and salt air filled the square. We walked between the stalls, talking about small things, books, food, the sea. For a while, it felt like we were just a father and daughter again, not two people rebuilding from the ruins of grief. That's when it happened, the chance encounter that neither of us expected. As we stopped to look at a table of handmade candles, a familiar voice called out from behind the booth. "Ava?" Ava turned, her eyes widening in shock. A young woman stood there, her face tanned, her long dark hair tied back in a braid. For a moment, Ava didn't speak. Then she whispered, "No way, Hannah?" The woman smiled, stepping around the booth to hug her. "It is you! I can't believe this. It's been years." I watched in surprise as Ava clung to her, tears in her eyes. When they pulled apart, Ava introduced us. "Dad, this is Hannah. She was one of my friends, from Hawaii." The air between us shifted slightly. Hawaii, the word alone carried so much weight now. But I stayed quiet, shaking Hannah's hand politely. I moved out here last year, Hannah said, glancing at Ava with a warm smile. I opened this little shop with my husband. I never thought I'd see you again. I tried reaching out after. She hesitated. After everything happened, but you changed your number. Ava looked down, embarrassed. Yeah, I wasn't in a good place then. I figured, Hannah said softly. But I'm glad to see you now. You look better. Ava smiled weakly. Trying to be. They talked for a while, catching up on the past few years. I stood back, listening quietly. I learned that Hannah had been one of the friends Ava had gone on that Hawaii trip with, the same one I'd spent months resenting, imagining as the careless influence that pulled my daughter away from her dying mother. But the more she spoke, the more I realized she wasn't that person at all. She was gentle, grounded, and full of empathy. At one point, Hannah looked at me and said, Ava's mom was amazing. She used to talk about her all the time back then. Even during that trip. That caught me off guard. She did? Hannah nodded. Yeah, she'd sit by the water every evening and tell stories about her mom. We could all tell she was struggling. She put on a brave face, but she wasn't really there to have fun. I think she just didn't know how to deal with what was happening. I glanced at Ava. Her eyes were shining with tears, but she smiled through them. I didn't think anyone noticed, she said quietly. Oh, we noticed, Hannah said. We worried about you. The night you got the news, I'll never forget that. You just disappeared from the group for hours. When we found you, you were standing knee-deep in the ocean, crying. None of us knew what to do. Ava's lip trembled. You were there when I found out? Hannah nodded softly. You didn't say it out loud. But we knew. You said, she's gone. And then you just started shaking. I wanted to take you to the airport that night. But you said you couldn't face it. You just kept saying you couldn't face your dad. Ava looked down, tears falling freely now. I reached out and put a hand on her shoulder. Hey, I said gently. It's okay. She nodded, trying to smile. We just didn't know how to help. They talked a little longer before saying their goodbyes. Hannah made Ava promise to visit again soon, and before we left, she handed her a small candle. For your mom, she said softly. It's lavender. You said that was her favorite. Back in the car, Ava held the candle in her lap, staring at it quietly. After a while, she said, You know what's strange? Hearing her talk about that night, it's like I was watching someone else. I don't even remember parts of it. It's like my mind buried it to protect me. That happens, I said. Grief has a way of hiding memories we aren't strong enough to face. She nodded. It feels like maybe today was Mom's way of reminding me that I wasn't as alone as I thought. When we got home, she placed the candle on the windowsill beside Claire's photo and lit it. The scent of lavender filled the room. We stood there for a long time, neither of us speaking. The flame flickered gently, its light reflecting off the glass frame. After a few minutes, Ava said softly, I think Mom's still leading me to the people and places I need to see to heal. I smiled faintly. She always had a way of guiding us, didn't she? Ava nodded. Even from wherever she is now. As the candle burned low, the house felt warmer than it had in years. The ghosts that once haunted its walls seemed quieter, as if peace had finally found a place to rest. And for the first time since Claire's death, I felt a strange, quiet gratitude for the pain, the healing, and the small miracles that come when you least expect them. Because sometimes, healing doesn't come from the people you lose, it comes from the ones who reappear when you need them most. The morning sunlight poured softly through the curtains when I found the letter. It happened by accident. I was cleaning out the old cedar chest at the foot of our bed. Claire's chest, the one she'd filled with mementos, photos, and keepsakes from the life we built together. I hadn't touched it since the funeral. Part of me was afraid to. But that day, something told me it was time. Inside were things I hadn't seen in years. The ticket stubs from our first movie date. A seashell Ava had given her after a family trip. a stack of handwritten recipes in her looping handwriting. Each item carried the weight of her presence, and the ache in my chest returned in full force. Near the bottom, beneath a faded quilt, I found a white envelope sealed carefully with Claire's neat handwriting on the front. For Ava. For a long time, I just stared at it. My hands trembled as I turned it over, as though the paper itself were sacred. I didn't know when she'd written it, but I knew what it meant. This was her goodbye. Ava was in the kitchen making breakfast when I walked in, the letter, and held carefully in my hands. She looked up, smiling faintly, but when she saw my expression, her smile faltered. "What's that?" I set the envelope on the table. "Something your mother left for you." Her eyes widened. "What?" "I found it this morning. I didn't know it existed. She must have written it near the end, before she got too weak." Ava stared at the envelope as if it might disappear if she blinked. Her hands shook as she reached for it. "Can I?" "Of course," I said softly, pulling out a chair. She sat down, took a deep breath, and carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded page, written in Claire's familiar handwriting, graceful and strong despite the frailty she must have been feeling when she wrote it. Ava began to read aloud, her voice breaking from the very first line. "My sweet Ava, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to hold your hand. But I want you to know that I never really left. I'm still with you in the wind, in the waves, in every small thing that reminds you of home." Her hands trembled as she continued. "I know you're angry at yourself. I know you think you failed me. But you didn't. You were scared, and that's human. We all are, when we face losing someone we love. Please don't let guilt become your inheritance. Let love be what you remember instead." Ava stopped for a moment, wiping her eyes. Her voice was barely a whisper when she read on. "I forgave you the moment you walked out that door, because I knew my daughter's heart. You've always carried too much of the world inside you, too much feeling, too much care. You thought leaving would protect you from pain. But love doesn't work that way, sweetheart. Love follows you, no matter how far you run." Tears streamed down Ava's face now, falling onto the page. Her voice shook as she reached the final paragraph. "When you're ready, come home. Not just to the house but to yourself. You are not the girl who left, you are the woman I always hoped you'd become. Brave, flawed, but full of grace. Take care of your father. He'll pretend to be strong, but he'll need you more than he admits. And when you both miss me, look for me in the places where laughter used to live. That's where I'll be. I love you endlessly, Mom." Ava set the letter down, covering her mouth as she sobbed. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close. Her entire body shook, but there was something different about her tears this time. They weren't the cries of guilt or regret, they were the cries of release. "She forgave me," Ava whispered through her tears. "She really forgave me." "She did," I said softly. "She always did." We sat there for a long time, the morning sun bathing us in golden light. The air felt lighter somehow, as if the letter had opened a window in our hearts we didn't know was still closed. After a while, Ava looked up at me, her eyes red but calm. "I want to do something for her," she said. "Something that honors her." "What do you have in mind?" She smiled faintly. "You'll see." The following weekend, we drove back to our old house together. It had been years since we'd both stood in that driveway. The garden was overgrown, the paint on the porch chipped, but somehow it still felt like home. Ava carried a small box in her hands. Inside was the lavender candle Hannah had given her, the one she'd kept by her bed since that day at the market. She placed it on the porch beside a photo of Claire and lit the wick. "She loved this place," Ava whispered. "It deserves to feel alive again." We spent the entire day cleaning up the garden, trimming the hedges, replanting Claire's favorite flowers, lilies, daisies, and lavender. By the time the sun began to set, the yard was glowing with color. When the last rays of light hit the garden, Ava stood beside me and whispered, "I think she'd like this." I nodded, my throat tight. She'd be proud. That night, back at the cottage, we watched home videos. Old footage of birthdays, beach trips, Christmas mornings. Claire's laughter filled the room again, echoing off the walls like a melody I'd almost forgotten. Ava leaned against my shoulder, smiling through tears. I used to hate hearing her voice on these videos. It made me feel like I'd lost her all over again. But now, it feels like she's here. She is, I said quietly. She never really left. For the first time since Claire's passing, the house didn't feel haunted. It felt whole. Ava's laughter, once weighed down by guilt, was light again, pure and real. Later that night, after she'd gone to bed, I sat alone by the window, staring at the moonlight reflecting on the ocean. I took out Claire's letter, the one she'd written to me years ago on our anniversary, and read her words again. Love doesn't end, Daniel. It changes shape. When you think of me, don't think of loss. Think of how lucky we were to have found each other at all. I smiled through my tears. You were right, Claire, I whispered. You always were. As the waves rolled gently against the shore, I realized something profound. Grief never really goes away, it just transforms, softening over time until it becomes gratitude. And that night, surrounded by the echo of my wife's love and the peace in my daughter's laughter, I finally understood what Claire had meant. Love doesn't die. It finds new ways to live,